Another kind of retrieval is an autobiographical memory. So these are memories of events that happen to you. Those would be the periods in your lifetime, your childhood, your teenage years, just general events that you experienced, but it could also be specific information, a particular party that you went to, particular type of thing. So you might remember some of the parties that you went to in general, but maybe you remember something happened at a specific party. And these are autobiographical, and you have a lot of emotional attachment to these particular memories. They may, of course, be incorrect. We often forget some of the things about or the memories, and therefore, if you have a friend, for example, who experienced the same event, you and your friend may have very different memories of the same event you experienced. And it's not just because you might have perceived it differently. Maybe you did perceive the same event differently when it happened to you, but you might be remembering it differently now. It turns out you're probably both going to be wrong, because our autobiographical memories, our memories are flawed, and that the memories of the things that happen to us, we're often just trying to piece it together what happened many years ago, today. Therefore, events that might be going on today might be influencing the way in which we're remembering events from our childhood. Okay. Emotional memories have kind of a stronger emotional attachment. We might have a more vivid memory of those emotional, particularly flashbulb memories. These are like big, huge emotional events in our lives that are, again, traumatic events that happen to us. These are things that we may have a very strong memory of, and essentially maybe seem like a clearer picture. And often it is a clearer picture, although oftentimes it still can be wrong too. On the other hand, we might experience a traumatic event, and instead of having a flashbulb memory, which is a clear, distinct memory of the event, we might actually repress the memory. Maybe if this event is just too painful for us to remember, to keep us from going crazy, we repress it. We push it out of our consciousness. We quote-unquote forget it. We don't, in other words, we don't do it intentionally necessarily, but we're motivated to do it. So we might sometimes unconsciously forget certain things. It's a motivated form of forgetting. In therapy circumstances, there might be a circumstance where this is very painful memory pushed down out of your memory. But nevertheless, the memory might still be triggering some stress in your life. You might still be having some problems as a result of this particular unpleasant memory. And even though it's repressed, even though you don't consciously remember it, it may be causing you problems. It may be causing you to behave in a maladaptive way. I think this is what psychoanalysts would say. So a psychoanalyst like Freud would essentially try to dig at and try to get at that repressed memory, find out what's going on, and be able to cope with it, be able to confront it, and deal with it. So an example of a flashbulb memory can be shown here. This is when the President's Chief of Staff is whispering to George W. Bush as he's reading a book to children that a plane has just hit one of the Twin Towers in New York City. And, maybe he remembers this very vividly. It's just a huge, shocking moment. Now, I bet you even remember, if you're still alive, if you were alive at the time, you might remember December 11, 2001, and where were you when it happened, when you heard about it. You might remember seeing it on TV and everything. There's still going to be some fuzzy aspect, something that you might see on a TV, maybe 5 years ago, you assume was what you saw on September 11th. So there's where you might you get your memories mixed up, but it's still going to seem like a very clear picture for you. Okay, now we're going to be talking about false memories. And it's a very controversial topic, and there are a number of different perspectives on it. On the one hand, you have people from the psychoanalytic point of view, Freudian point of view, that, people repress the memories of unpleasant experiences from childhood, and they're repressed, and they can affect us in various ways. They can affect us in our dreams. We might engage in defense mechanisms to try to deal with them. But in other words, we push them out of our consciousness, and essentially it's like a motivated forgetting when you push them out of your consciousness. So that's the idea of repression. You're repressing those memories. And there is some evidence that people do experience traumatic childhood events like child abuse, and do repress it. On the other hand, you could look at memory as a reconstruction of the past. And when people are talking about stuff that happened to them in childhood, they're really just reconstructing from their present point of view. And this reconstruction may or may not have much consistency with what actually happened. Furthermore, there is such a thing as the false memory syndrome, where people can actually learn to believe a false memory, and this belief in this false memory nevertheless has strong emotional effects. So you might remember something that happened, and this memory might be something that is very important to your self-concept even, but maybe this event never actually happened. So it's a pretty interesting phenomenon, but there's evidence that it does happen. Furthermore, you can have a circumstance where a therapist might think that his or her patient has had some kind of a traumatic incident of child abuse, let's say, and the therapist, might be meaning well, but may actually be kind of leading the patient to believe that he or she did experience abuse when in fact it never happened. And once that happens, once the patient is actually led to believe that it actually happened, the patient actually does believe it. And it's been shown in research, actually. You can actually really and truly believe that a false memory actually happened to you. Another way that the false memory can come into play is through source misattribution. You might have heard a story about someone, not yourself, and from that story you might have essentially thought like essentially that it happened to you when it really happened to somebody else. Or even you could have maybe a family member tell you a story about yourself that you don't remember happening, but you'll develop a memory of that incident just based on the story you're told from your relative. And it makes it feel as if it actually, it feels like that you actually remember that happening to you when actually you don't. So, nevertheless, there's a lot of ways in which we can form memories that are not based on our own experiences, but our impressions, but maybe from other sources and whatnot. We can invent memories. Elizabeth Loftus is a very, is probably one of the leading researchers on memory, and she has, she's actually done a lot of research essentially showing that, the researcher can actually get people to believe false memories. And once people believe, they can essentially, once you can kind of lead people to believe that that some false memory happened, they actually believe it. They fabricate their own memories of this, even though it never actually happened to them. there is research on this. Elizabeth Loftus, interestingly enough, has been often used as an expert witness on cases when it comes to memory, particularly eyewitness testimony, for example, as a case where there could be a lot of memory failure. There was one very high-profile case in which a woman accused a worker at a daycare center when she was a child, accused him of sexually abusing her as a child, and that when she was an adult, this memory of abuse came about through therapy. So this is, again, like a recovered memory. Okay? Now, the interesting thing was that the memory, again, with recovered memories, it's a controversial issue here. Could it be a false memory that was somehow put in by the therapist, let's say, whatnot? Well, Elizabeth Loftus was brought in as an expert witness, talking about false memories and the idea that that her memory of the event may not actually have happened, that it was it could have been just a false memory. It turned out that the woman who made the accusation, there were some inconsistencies in her story or whatever, and the guy who was accused was found not guilty. Okay? Now the woman who made the accusation, she was obviously very upset about it. Remember, even if the event never actually happened to her, if she has a memory of it, even if it is a false memory, the false memory can nevertheless generate a lot of emotional impact. So if you have a false memory of abuse, that's going to be just as strong as a real memory of abuse. Well, basically, she was obviously very angry about Loftus's testimony because it was very crucial to the case, the defense, and she ended up suing Elizabeth Loftus. And it turned out that they actually had people come, like FBI come in and into her office and take her computer, confiscate her computers and everything. It was a very dramatic thing. She talked about this incident in a talk that I attended once, and it was very interesting. But it was, so I mean, it's a really controversial issue here. But again, what we've learned about memory is that memory is reconstructed. We can have memories of things that never actually happened to us, and those memories can be very strong. Which brings us also to eyewitness testimony. Basically, eyewitness testimony is extremely unreliable, and unfortunately, eyewitness testimony is kind of the hallmarks of our justice system. When someone is accused of a crime and an eyewitness saw the crime, well, guilty as charged, but really, eyewitness testimony can be very faulty. There can be distortions. In other words, you see something, but your perception of what you see, it could be quite different from what actually happened. If we were to talk about, in the topic of sensation and perception, we can learn about ways in which our visual perception is distorted in many ways, and so really it can be distorted. Furthermore, it can be distorted especially by bias. If you have if an eyewitness has a particular bias, let's say a bias against black people, or a bias against the police, or whatever other kind of bias, this bias can actually color how the person interprets what they see. So they may actually remember something that doesn't actually exist because the remembrance is kind of based on that bias, and they see what they want to see. They see what they expect to see rather than what is actually there. When we talk about schemas, for example, if you remember the concept of schema, if you have a particular schema about, well, this is how the police behave, or this is how black people behave, then when you see a crime, then you are going to color your perception of what you see based on those biases, based on that schema. And again, you're seeing what you expect to see. And of course, these biases, these distortions lead to inaccuracy. Essentially, you're going to see something that, and sometimes the inaccuracies are striking, how inaccurate they are. But realize this, it does not mean that eyewitnesses are lying. Obviously, sometimes it does happen. But in most cases, eyewitnesses honestly and truly believe in what they are saying, even if what they are saying is 100% false. Again, it has to do with our memories can fool us. We think we remember something, but it's really inaccurate. Okay, let's talk about, here's an example of a study that was done to illustrate how leading questions can guide people who would be eyewitnesses to remember incidents in a different light. If you were shown a picture or a video of a car accident, okay, so you are witnessing this, and then you were asked the question, about how fast were the cars going when they contacted each other? So you're going to give an answer. Maybe another group of you, you're going to say about how fast were the cars going when they hit each other. Hit is a little bit stronger than contacted. Contacted sounds like ding. Hit sounds like hit. Well, how about this? About how fast were the cars going when they smashed into each other? Well, in that case, the estimate when the question is smashed into each other, the estimate was a lot larger than when the question was about contacting each other. And this is, again, how the leading questions can essentially bias our memory. It could make us remember things differently. And as a result, this is a lot where you can get an accuracy. So again, this is one of the things with eyewitness testimony that can happen. And you remember if you think about seeing courtroom dramas on TV, objection, Your Honor, leading a witness. The idea is, you don't want the attorney who is questioning the witness to ask leading questions. Get the witness to answer the way you, the questioner, want the witness to answer. And that is the idea of leading questions. So, if I'm looking for the biggest money in the lawsuit for the car accident, I'm going to ask about smashing into each other. I'm working on defense of the guy who hit the car. Okay, how fast were the cars going when they contacted each other? I want to get a slower estimate, not the smashed into estimate.